We're looking at the waiver wire going into week 9. We have a few injuries and trades to look at that's impacting the wide receiver position. And the Jacksonville Jaguars are getting very interesting. Christian Kirk's out. Brian Thomas Jr.'s day-to-day right now with an injury. And now we're looking at Parker Washington right now. He had a game last year where he blew up, really put the NFL on notice. But we got to look at him again because he might be walking into some opportunity. But before we dig in, before we do this deep dive, you need to click that subscribe button right now. We're doing these deep dives all day long, every day on as many players as possible so you can get the advanced analytics, a rough draft on the situation at hand for these players so you can make the decisions for your team. Watch them a la carte style, whatever you want. We're also going deep on the waiver wire, and we're using these videos to help you set your lineups all season long and all season long next year and the year after. Click that button, stop missing out. Ric Flair's watching. Do not disappoint him. He's a good guy back there. But Brian Thomas Jr.'s day-to-day chest injury might be in, might be out a week, might not. We're watching this like a hawk right now because we love Brian Thomas Jr. We've loved him for quite some time. Christian Kirk out for the season. This is the big impact here for Parker Washington, and we're going to be watching this like a hawk as well. His snaps, where he's lining up, and everything else. Kirk is out though. Gabe Davis has been banged up, but he's tracking to play for week 9. There's a lot of optimism with that. So we're starting to get a good idea of what this wide receiver depth chart is going to be looking like here very soon. But Parker Washington last week ran on 74% of the snaps. That is a big indicator that he's going to be a key part of the offense. Caught 3 balls for 46 yards. Got you a few fantasy points there. Also, if you get kick return points, this is another guy to look at here. Scored a lot of them last week. And back-to-back weeks doing pretty well there for you. But going back to Penn State, not over the moon with volume stats here. But we were productive. Broke out in 2021, 820 yards, 4 touchdowns. His ADOT in 2022, 10.3, 11.3 as a freshman. Yards per route run in 2022, 2.18. We hit 2 in 2021. So we're not over the moon with everything. We're just good enough to get the job done. Not a tremendous prospect when it comes to the production. But that's kind of the reason why we get drafted in the 6th round. But we forecast from what we saw from college as a very strong slot receiver with good size and sticky hands. And that's what we saw last year when he broke out in his first game with 18.1 PPR fantasy points. And you can also deploy him all over the field. He's not just a slot guy. You can mix him up. However, that's where his role typically would land on most teams. The thing about him is he's a sneaky route runner. And he's good at contested catches. He's good at using body control. And he's just a solid wide receiver. And you get a lot of solid wide receivers that you do not pay attention to because they're not Justin Jefferson. But he's a solid wide receiver. You put on any offense, they're happy to have him. That's what Parker Washington is. And he's able to be productive in the right moments because he's already proven that. And looking at what he's been doing this year and last year, 2023, with 177 routes ran. He ran at a 75.8% slot rate. Right now we're at 23.5, but honestly, we're not even hitting 100 routes yet. And that's also an indicator that we could be moved around a little bit more in the offense, which is fine. And then also the ADOT has creeped up a little bit. The ADOT has creeped up a little bit for Christian Kirk as well. That being said, we're getting more vertical in the offense. That just means more fantasy potential for these wide receivers. A lot of this is Brian Thomas Jr. being able to push those DBs back with that speed, allowing the other wide receivers to work a little bit deeper, and also how the offense wants to be deployed. We're not getting much yards after the catch, but that's not his game. His game, slot, moved around, breaking off the routes, contested catches were money with the sticky hands, but we're watching his slot rate because Christian Kirk ran at an 81.7% slot rate. And with Gabe Davis back and with Brian Thomas Jr. back, of course, those 2 wide receivers are going to be primarily on the outside. You will move them around. No one's going to be 1 for 1 or 100%. But we're seeing if that rate will forecast to Parker Washington, and if the snap share will be similar. In 2024, 13.7 ADOT for Christian Kirk, one of the highest of his career ever, counting for college. They're getting vertical in the offense with everybody. That is the sign here. With Christian Kirk out, though, when you might see Parker Washington get more routes per game, more snaps per game, which is quite obvious going forward, which could lead to fantasy production. And we're looking at the routes ran here on the season. Christian Kirk, 220 off the board, 5.9 targets per game off the board, 1.8 targets per game for Parker Washington going into this. That being said, that's going to go to other wide receivers. A lot of those routes, when you look at the rest of the wide receivers in the offense, that's going to Parker Washington. That's probably going to be his role in the offense. The targets may not be the same. The amount of targets, it could be less, could be more, depending on how he's playing. But we're also looking at Evan Ingram. He could be seeing more work. Evan Ingram's fantasy potential could be more legit going forward. He's rocking a 23.1% target share. That could increase. His routes could increase per game. You could see him just getting more work in general on top of Brian Thomas Jr. just balling out this season, having a great rookie season. That's the inverse effect of that. You could see Evan Ingram go off. So if someone's commenting that below, what about Evan Ingram? I just answered that for you. You could see that in the range of outcomes. The other range of outcomes is Parker Washington playing the slot, running a lot of routes, and targets are just going to Brian Thomas Jr. and a little bit to Gabe Davis, and he's just funneled a few. That's in the range of outcomes, but he could have games where the game script is all over the place. We've seen that with Jacksonville, and he gets funneled targets, and it's up in the air. I'm talking in a range of outcomes, not giving you straight takes because I'm trying to cover all the bases here, and you're going after what you want. But I do see an increase of routes, and I do see an increase of targets to some degree. He will be out on the field more. That's almost a given right now. And looking at what Christian Kirk has done on the field, 2 wide receiver 2 weeks, a bunch of wide receiver 3 weeks, 3 games of double-digit PPR fantasy production. That being said, it's not over the moon. So you're really counting on Parker Washington to be better than this or to be like this. So averaging 8 to 10 fantasy points per game. I see that the likely outcome here, and with some spike weeks, maybe a week where he does get 19, maybe a week where he gets to a 15 spot, maybe more, maybe less, maybe with some spike weeks and down weeks. I see this. I see something similar to Christian Kirk and fantasy potential, and maybe we get longer dry runs, and maybe the high runs are a little bit higher. Maybe. It could be different. It's all game script dependent. But usually targets don't run one for one when a wide receiver goes out and the next man goes up. That next wide receiver either has to start performing better than the previous wide receiver that earned those targets, or those targets are going to spread out a little bit more. I look for Evan Ingram to get more run in the offense. I look for him to get more targets. I look for Parker Washington to run a lot more routes, see more snaps, and that should trickle in to targets. That should be that trickle-down economics that you're seeing in this offense. I think there's going to be games where he's going to give you spotty production. I don't look at him as a wide receiver that's a must-get, that you gotta have, that you gotta grab off the waiver wire. I just don't see that. I do see him as a wide receiver that you may want to hold to see what happens with, to see if he can do more than Kirk. That's in the range of outcomes, but it's not really likely. But also, when you're looking at Parker Washington, you're in a deeper league. He is a wide receiver that will be on the field, probably running like a 75% route participation rate, getting a good snap share, and in the right moments, he could pop for you. In the right moments, he can drown on you. That's the thing about him. I look for Brian Thomas Jr. to be the guy. Evan Ingram's going to be looking good. I look for Parker Washington and Gabe Davis to be volatile. I look for them to be good in their own right. So speaking on those terms, you don't need him because there's other wide receivers available off the waiver wire. Wide receiver has been decently deep with lottery tickets week to week off the waiver wire this year, especially these last few weeks. There's just guys to pluck in and out. So you're playing the matchups. If there's already a wide receiver on the waiver wire who's getting a 20% target share, you rock that wide receiver instead of him. That is better process because you know the targets are being concentrated to him, and all it takes is the chips to fall the right way for that wide receiver to hit. Parker Washington right now is a little bit of an unknown. Christian Kirk wasn't really that great in fantasy right now to begin with, so how much better can he be compared to Christian Kirk? I imagine you will get some good weeks out of him. I imagine that's going to happen. But there's probably a wide receiver sitting there with a 20+% target share. That's probably not getting air yards. That's probably up and down and spiky that you might be able to go after. You want to stash him because you want to play this offense through. This offense is getting vertical. They are in tricky matchups. He will give you production in spurts if he's on the field. That's the thing about that. You may not be able to hammer out the right game, but I can tell you this, he will be on the field enough to get you a game here and there where it will be good for fantasy football. I look for low points, much like the Christian Kirk chart, because Brian Thomas Jr. is that dog. Evan Ingram is a dog. Dog. Trevor Lawrence is up and down. That's another thing to look at. But there will be spike weeks, and there will be a lot of low point weeks. And I could be wrong on that. He could be consistently bad or consistently good. That would be where my take would run back. But I believe he's going to be on the field a lot, see an opportunity, and that could happen. And also, I just pointed out how I could be wrong, and that's potentially how I could be wrong if he's consistently good and bad. I see him getting enough run in this offense for you to want to look at him. It could be hard in a lot of 12-man leagues to pick him up and play with him. If you're in a 14-teamer, 16-teamer, he might be best in those formats. However, if you're really decimated at wide receiver, and wide receivers hit hard in a 12-man league, and maybe you start extra flex spots, extra wide receivers, you start 5 of them or something, he's a guy to look at there because he is going to run routes, he is going to get opportunities, and I think it's going to be up and down. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on the way out. One, thanks for watching. Catch you on the next video.